This is Jay Carpenter of the PhoneWord Forum, and today is Wednesday, March the 28th, 2012. It's approximately 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and today we are talking about the toll-free industry in North America. We'll have Aelea Christopherson joining us. We currently have Mark Healy on the line, and we'll see who else arrives. So, Mark, do you want to say anything about your company?
MyEmergency.com is the product that is an emergency medical record that persists in the cloud and is synchronized down to the smartphones, the Android and the iPhones, and provides edge of network access to the data as well
Aelea
as...
Christopherson.
Great. Hi, Aelea.
Hi.
Welcome. Mark, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. All right. Hello.
Tom.
Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm well. Give it another minute or so for some folks to arrive.
Okay. I'm going to go on mute.
Okay. I am at Gangplank today, which is a collaborative workspace in Chandler, Arizona, which is where I met Mark, and we've been talking about some synergies between what's going on with PhoneWord and My Emergency. So appreciate you joining us today, Mark.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, Aelea, why don't we go ahead and get started, and we'll see, who else joins us. Hello, who just joined?
Paul Faust.
Hi, Paul. Welcome.
How are you, sir? Hello, Ms. Shaw.
Hello.
Jay, can you hear me?
Hammerschlag.
Hi, Greg. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and get started. The topic today is an update on the toll-free telephone number industry in North America. I'll introduce Aelea. Aelea Christopherson is with ATL Communications, which is one of the largest independent rest board provider or independent rest board service providers in North America. And ATL has some large clients. And for those of you that might not know what a RESTborg is I'll call it sort of a trusted agent that provides provisioning for toll-free telephone number subscribers. And Aelea is someone who has been instrumental basically from day one of the toll-free industry in terms of writing the guidelines for the toll-free telephone number administration, active member and SNAC. She's also I would say, the point person for the transition team or committee to transition to governance of toll-free numbering from what has been basically a three-company consortium of some of the prominent Bell operating companies. There's an initiative underway to transition that governance from those three companies into industry-wide representative body. So with that introduction, Aelea, is there anything I'm missing, anything else you'd like to say? And
No.
before we get into that, is there anything that anyone would like to cover on the call today? These phone word forums are an open forum for the toll-free number industry for people to, talk about things that matter to them. So is there anything anybody would like to cover today? All right. Well, Aelea, is anything else you'd like to say about your background, ATL, et cetera?
Well, one thing I wanted to know is, do you have an idea of who is on the call?
Well, so far we have Paul Faust and Greg Hammerschlag from Primary Wave. Are you familiar with Primary Wave?
Yes, as a matter of fact.
Okay. So we have Tom Ogle from MBZ Communications. Hello. Who just joined?
Oh, hi, this is Bill.
Hi, Bill. How are you?
All right. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Good. Bill Revell, who's a longtime industry veteran in the toll-free number space and telecommunications arena. We also have Mark, is it Hurd? I'm sorry, Mark? Healy. Mark Healy with myemergency.com, which is an innovative emergency E911 service using smartphone apps. Let's see, who else? Anybody else that I've missed? So does that give you a cross-section of the folks on the call?
Yeah, that gives me a good idea. So I'm just going to go through the three topics as Jay put them out. A couple things on the introduction. ATL is actually the only large independent RESPORG, and when Jay says we're one of the largest independent RESPORGs, we're actually one of the largest RESPORGs. There's 400 RESPORGs, more or less, and ATL falls out in the 6th or 7th largest in the country. And the difference is, and you'll hear other companies talk about being independent RESPORGs. In our definition of independent, it means that you have to have no ties to carriers of any kind. We don't take money from carriers. We don't have contracts with carriers, so that we have no vested interest in what carrier our clients want to put their numbers on. What we do have is long ago, like I guess almost 20 years ago, negotiated arrangement with the carriers that because we are independent and because they trust that we know how to set up networks, that we can go in and put a carrier identification code into route traffic without having to do anything in advance. We're pre-approved to do that. Obviously, our clients have to have carrier relationships because the carrier has to know where to terminate the calls. But as far as in the case of disaster recovery, we can, within a couple minutes, take somebody's traffic off of AT&T and put it in on Verizon. We don't have to do something in between to move that traffic. In that capacity, I also chair the SMS Inc. Transition Committee. About a year and a half ago, well actually several years ago, but it didn't go anywhere, there started to be a move towards understanding that who we thought the RESPORGs were going to be in the late 1980s when we designed all this isn't really how reality is today. Of these 400 RESPORGs, many of them are not carriers. They certainly aren't all Bell operating companies, yet the management of all the major decisions that are made in toll-free having to do with the system that everybody uses. All the toll-free numbers go through one database. The tariff that determines how RESPORGs operate, all of that is determined by a board called SMS 800 Inc., which has, and still is, historically the Bell operating companies. It was that way because in the beginning that's who the FCC charged with designing toll-free number portability, and it just never changed. So about a year and a half ago, a group of us went to the FCC and said, this doesn't really make sense anymore. The Bell operating companies are not only they're not the only players, they're not even the largest RESPORGs any longer in some cases. And the board needs to be expanded to be more representative of the RESPORG and service control point community. The FCC totally agreed. Then early last year, after a survey of the industry that was done by the current SMS board, there was a transition committee put in place to begin to design how this change was going to be made. What that committee came up with was an election process where RESPORGs and service control, SCP, they call them SCP owner-operators, could run for board positions. The number of people on the board was expanded. And, we developed how the vote was going to happen, who could vote, all those kind of things. We presented that to the FCC in late January, and there got to be some issues with the current board kind of participating in the committee, then saying that they weren't a part of the committee, and a little confusion happened along the way in that case. So unlike what we had all planned, which was the committee and the current SMS board doing that presentation in January together, the transition committee did the presentation, and yesterday, the current board filed with the FCC. I don't know, they may have filed it today, but they presented to the committee a counter proposal for how they think the committee should be set up. Not so much the election as how the board should be set up. It is in some ways the same, in other ways different than what we had suggested. As you would expect, it gives the Bell operating companies more presence on the board than what we had designed. And so March 9th, the two bodies are going to meet in Chicago and see if we can come to a common agreement on this, because the FCC would much prefer, and so would we from a timing standpoint, that we give them one agreed upon design, because if we don't, then they're going to have an NPRM and all that kind of thing, and it'll just drag out the process for an election that we were hoping would be happening about now.
Aelea, you said March 9th. Did you mean April 9th?
April 9th. Excuse me, April 9th.
Okay. And I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Has the incumbent SMS 800 Inc. met with the FCC, or they're simply filing a tariff at this point?
They're just filing. It's not even a tariff. They're filing the proposal that they gave us yesterday. So it's just an ex parte filing. It's not. They're not doing anything else with it.
Okay. Thank you.
So what it does is it gives the FCC the ex parte proposal that we met with them on, and the ex parte proposal that the current board is filing, and then the hope is that April 9th we can put those together and come to something that both bodies agree on. one of the things that kind of got overlaid on this that may have a very positive outcome, we are hoping it does, is in the process to put together a new board, it became apparent that SMS 800 Inc. was going to need to have an executive director. The board is unpaid, and we didn't want board membership to be driven by the size of the company that a company could afford to have somebody working full-time on the board, and those would be the only people who could run for the board. For instance, the CEO of the current, just stepped down in the last couple of weeks, who was from Verizon, from Quest, spent 80% of her time as CEO of the board, and that was going to make it impossible for some smaller companies to participate if that was really going to be how it was set up. So a new executive...
Aelea, this is Jay. I've got a question. When you say the board is unpaid, are you talking about the proposed board, or are you talking about the incumbent SMS 800 Inc. board?
The proposed board is unpaid. The current board they're not paid by SMS 800 Inc. They're paid by their companies, but their companies are large enough to have somebody who just does this.
Right.
And in the early design, we saw that as a problem, because if you're a small company, you can't lend your CEO to spend 80% of their time running SMS 800 Inc.
Right. And kind of along those lines, has the transition committee gotten any kind of financial information from SMS 800 Inc. regarding the current financial architecture and structure of SMS 800 Inc., or is that still a question?
Yeah, nothing that's not in the tariff. What was designed into this is that when the new board is elected, there'll be a period of time that they will be seated as an advisory committee, and to help transition from the existing board to the new board. And during that time, as an advisory committee, they would have access to that kind of detail. And the length of time they would be an advisory committee would be decided between the advisory committee and the new board. It is believed, and I agree, that this is a very big job. This board controls multi-million-dollar budgets and personnel, and the sort of slash cut, okay, the old board's gone, now we've got the new board, seemed like it was going to be unrealistic. And also that the existing board was unwilling to share proprietary information with a general committee that through non-disclosures or something will be able to share it with the elected initially advisory committee.
Okay, thank you.
Last week, or the week before, I guess it was last week, the board announced the hiring of an executive director. His name's Tom Fitzgerald. Other than his biography, a lot of us, don't know much about him. He comes from Frontier. I've talked to him briefly on the phone and exchanged some emails with him. It all seems, at least from what I'm seeing, this seems like very good news for the industry. I was going to read you something that he said today, because I think for this group, this is exactly what, a lot of us have been waiting for. He says, I'm looking forward to working with the committee to help modernize and enhance the toll-free industry and the services provided by SMS. My goal is to make sure 800 services are relevant and necessary as technology and social media sculpt the future for the communications industry. So clearly, he's looking ahead to, what is it that's going to make toll-free viable in the future. Clearly, he's come into the middle of kind of a hornet's nest with the opposing sides on the board structure. But he seems very confident that there's negotiation room, and there certainly is. The transition committee, there's parts of what the board suggested that are agreeable. They're good ideas. And there's some of it that most of us are not able to agree to. So it'll depend on how much negotiation room there is, how much of this was a negotiation that we all know where you start out with way more than you think you're going to get. If that's what they did, then there's room to do that. So like I said, I know very little about him. I haven't met him in person, but Anil Patel, who some of you know, who's probably second in DSMI, the business group that manages all this, is very positive and upbeat about him, and Anil is usually a pretty good judge of those kind of things and has spent a lot of time with him. So I'm optimistic from that standpoint.
Aelea, it's Greg Emmerschlag. What is his background?
He was a VP of New York or something for Frontier. That's the only thing that stuck in my mind. He's been in the industry for quite a while. He does not come out of any Bell company or any of those of us that are on these national committees. None of us knew him at all. So like I said, I don't really know much about him.
Okay.
It'll be interesting the week after next to meet him in person and see what kind of influence he has on the current board, seeing there who hired him. So it's yet to be seen, but I have put a lot of pressure on Fitzgerald and the other members of both committees. I'm going to be having a meeting at ComTel in mid-April with an update on what's happening with this. And so I have let them know that if something positive is not happening with it, that meeting will be quite different than if we're moving ahead. And by the way, anybody
Aelea,
who's... Yeah.
Would you explain Tom's position relative to the SMS 800 Inc. and DSMI? DSMI, for those of you that might not know, they're the vendor, I guess you would call them, that actually runs the whole database for all toll-free numbers in North America. And so they're sort of like a hired vendor to the group that I'm not sure I'd say owns, but at least controls the SMS 800 database, which is SMS 800 Inc.
Yeah, the help desk works for DSMI. The billing is done out of DSMI. It's a position that doesn't exist at all before this, so it's hard to put in perspective. Michael Wade, who has been the I don't know what his title is, but the head guy at DSMI, now reports to Tom Fitzgerald, who is employed by SMS 800 Inc. Besides being the board, SMS 800 Inc. is a company. It's a not-for-profit company. So, who has in the past never had any employees. So he is an employee of that company, and Michael Wade reports to him in the same way Michael Wade used to report directly to the board. But on the SNAC call today, and if I use acronyms people don't understand, please let me know. SNAC is the ADIS committee that that determines a lot of the changes that get made in toll-free. It became apparent that a lot of the issues we're working on are stalled a little bit for Tom to get up to speed on them too. So he's going to be very influential in that position as far as what happens to any changes in toll-free. I know that we talked about 3 different things today, everything from standardizing change requests for toll-free to whether or not toll-free was going to originate on IP. And all of them, Anil said, Tom is aware of this and getting up to speed, and in the next few weeks he should start giving us feedback on it. So I see that as a very positive. He also seems to want to have a much more hands-on involvement in these things than the current board really ever had. Did that answer your question?
Great.
So everything looks good, but it's, you know, kind of yet to be seen what things he'll actually be able to change. I would see that the outcome of this negotiation between the transition committee and the board, we're talking about a matter of weeks, not a matter of months, to either have concluded that or to find that we are not going to be able to come to an agreement, which I hope is not the outcome, at which case the problem will be is the FCC will have to file open comments on it, and that'll greatly slow down the process.
Your meeting in Chicago, Aelea, is that a one-day meeting or is it several days?
It's an afternoon and a morning.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not an open meeting.
Right.
The one in San Francisco, however, is open to anybody. It's going to be just an hour, the hour right before the kickoff reception for CompTel. I'm not expecting a huge crowd. I think the room only takes 30, so hopefully we won't be surprised. But it'll just be an update on where we're on just this subject, where we are then, what will be the week after this meeting in Chicago.
Okay. And again, the people attending the Chicago meeting will it be the full board of the SMS 800 Inc.? Or
Well, there's only 3 people on it. Yes, it'll be the full board of SMS 800 Inc., Tom Fitzgerald, and the full transition committee.
Okay. Anybody else from, will Anil or Michael Wade be attending?
Michael and Anil are invited. I don't know whether they've responded yet. And then Gina Perini, who is the counsel for the current board.
Okay.
Who really has acted in some way as the counsel for the transition committee too. She has, I mean, not that she can represent both of us, but up till now we haven't really been in that kind of relationship. She has written much of, rewritten, I should say, much of what we've done and looked at the legal aspects of a quorum and all that kind of thing. So we've had legal advice through her. And for those of you,
any questions at this point from anyone? Comments? Okay.
Maureen Callan, who was the CEO for many years, stepped down a couple weeks ago. So we've got the added overlay of somebody from CenturyLink who's brand new to this, so we'll have to see how that works too. Okay, general toll-free industry developments. The push for what happens to toll-free in light of where the rest of technology is going is really high on the minds of a lot of, well, Tom Fitzgerald for one, the SNAC committee. We have issues in front of us about origination of toll-free text, all those kind of things. So in my opinion, the industry is coming really late to this, but it's not like we aren't coming to it at all. To me, one of the most interesting things is going to be the opportunity for the new board to have shared with them what the capabilities are of the current SMS system and whether these kind of changes really are scrapping and starting over or whether it can be done within what's there. What we see SMS doing in development stages, and again, this may pull back some with Fitzgerald because some of us on the SNAC committee were very anti this move, is beginning to put, for instance, the GUI that smaller RESTborgs use on a whole different platform than MGI, which is what the big users use. And there's a fear that if they do that, the things that need to be done on the MGI platform aren't going to get done because there'll be too much concentration on the GUI. There was a pretty upheaval in the SNAC committee when we found that without our knowing it, they had approved a 2-year, $10 million upgrade to the GUI system. And more than 90% of everything that goes through SMS does not go through the GUI. So the time and effort put into improving that troubles a lot of the large RESTborgs. And I asked my people who use the GUI when they're doing, one or two numbers, and they don't really see much that needs to be done with it. So I'm not sure what the development's going to be. So as the industry develops, there's going to be this tension between I'm making this number up, the 375 RESTborgs that have very few numbers and do very little, and the 30 RESTborgs that do by far the majority of the processing on SMS, and the move that Tom Fitzgerald talks about as being more customer focused because the current SMS board has not really treated RESTborgs as customers. So that tension is probably going to become more talked about as this move towards SMS recognizing who their customers are. Because we all pay on a per number per month basis, that's all, you don't pay per transaction, you pay per number per month. So in my company's case, we pay over $100,000 a month for SMS versus somebody who may pay $50 a month. There's not the desire to make it so the $50 a month customer can't get access, but how the resources are spent, I think, might become more of an issue. One of the other developments is there has been a lot of talk for many years about what to do about sale of toll-free numbers because the reality of the law and the reality of what happens are really, really far apart. Sale of toll-free numbers is actually illegal based on federal regulations. It's not just some kind of toll-free guidelines. There's actually federal regulations that make hoarding, sale, and what's the other word? Warehousing a federal crime. But everybody does it. and everybody knows everybody does it. And so some of us have pushed for some time that the FCC needs to do one or the other. Either they need to police the federal regulations, the Enforcement Bureau portion of the FCC, or they need to, move into this century and realize that toll-free numbers have a marketable dollar amount that they're worth. And in an effort to get that moving along, it happens that my congressman is the chair of the, I never quite get this right, the Communications and Technology Subcommittee of the Congress, and also the FCC Reform Committee. And so I started a process with him to begin to talk about sale of toll-free numbers in the Australian model that Jay brought to us on the call, 6 or 8 months ago. In the meeting, the congressman had 3 staffers, 2 of them from the committee and 1 of his own staffers, and one of the people is on loan from the FCC. His name's Nick Degani, and they all thought this was a great idea, and asked if it had gone through Nancy. And as I think people who participate in this call realize that there was a white paper that went through Nancy that, as far as I can tell, isn't going anywhere. So it's kind of happening from 2 sides. The executive director of CompTel, Jerry James, has regular meetings with Robert McDowell, one of the commissioners. And so we are sort of working on 2 fronts on this. After CompTel's conference, because of course Jerry is totally overwhelmed at the moment with a conference coming up in 2 weeks. After that conference, he's going to assist me in the 2 of us meeting with McDowell. McDowell, as Jay was telling me, is very much a free market kind of guy. So, we should get a good reception there. Congressman Walden, actually, his job before he went into Congress is he owned radio stations, so he's pretty familiar with the FCC. So we'll have
and Aelea, I'd like to also note that Congressman Walden has got to be familiar with the way the radio spectrum auctions work as well.
Yes, in fact, he came up with that right away. Oh, you mean like we do for spectrum?
Right. And one of the things that we did in the white paper for the Future Numbering Working Group was draw the parallel between toll-free telephone numbers and radio spectrum, because up until I think it was the 70s or 80s, radio spectrum was treated as commons. In other words, nobody owned radio spectrum. And then because of some work that was done actually in 1959 by a Nobel Prize-winning economist, a fellow named Ron Coase, they actually said, well, we can auction off radio spectrum. And of course, that's become a key piece of not only the Federal Communications Commission, but around the world, there are now radio spectrum auctions. So, the path has been pioneered in the past with radio spectrum. So something that was basically owned by no one, which was radio spectrum, became open to a market-based allocation method. So, Congressman Walden's background in radio, the radio industry, and his position, I think, is very conducive to, making the case that, hey, this is something that's been done in the past, it's been very successful, and, in conjunction with the model that we can look at in Australia, we can say, hey, this has been very successful in the radio spectrum arena. Why don't we consider it, give it a serious consideration in the toll-free telephone number industry?
He was also a small businessman, so he's kind of got more of a business bent than, as opposed to having come from being a lawyer or something. He's got more of a conscience towards what makes sense. I met with a group of, I guess about half of them were CEOs and about half of them were CFOs in Los Angeles a few weeks ago to talk about this subject. I have yet to find any company who is opposed to it. There's a lot of concerns. People are beginning to talk about the realities of, okay, what does that mean for the smaller businesses, and how do we make sure that people can't buy up a whole bunch of numbers just to resell them? So there's a lot of things that would need to be ironed out. But I have yet to have anybody say, oh, that sounds like a terrible idea. So, but, this is in its very infancy, and this kind of thing doesn't happen very fast. So I don't mean to.
One of the points that I would like to keep very clear in everybody's minds is that there can be a hybrid ecosystem around this, market-based allocation for toll-free telephone numbers. There's a process whereby people can still get toll-free telephone numbers for the asking, basically, or even with the ones that are allocated on a market-based system, a lot of them would command practically zero in terms of price. But so, anybody that, I think one of the things that comes to mind is when people hear about a market-based allocation method for toll-free telephone numbers, or any telephone numbers for that matter, is that, oh my God, I don't want to pay. I've been getting these things for free. I don't want to have to pay for them. Well, I just want to make sure that people understand that there's a way to set this up so that people can still get toll-free telephone numbers for free. And if they want to buy one, it can be at a very low cost. However, there are going to be some numbers. I mean, it's kind of like an acre in Midtown Manhattan versus an acre in the middle of the Mojave Desert. There's a whole lot more desert than there is, acreage in Midtown Manhattan or Beverly Hills. Same thing with toll-free telephone numbers. However, the situation we face today is that all of a sudden the deed or the keys to an acre in Midtown Manhattan are going to be dropped out on the sidewalk, so that anybody, first come, first serve, the first person to pick up those keys gets this incredibly valuable resource. Well, that's created some rather unattractive management and administration problems with the SMS 800 database, where all of a sudden there's essentially a denial of service attack that occurs on the infrastructure of the SMS 800 database. I guess it's died down in the last few months, but it used to be nightly that all of a sudden there would be this deluge of requests that would pretty much bring the system to its knees. So I just wanted to make those points that the specter of everybody having to pay an enormous amount for toll-free telephone numbers is does not hold water in my view.
And that could be, this is one of the concerns that would have to be hammered through with, whatever companies decide to be. The other development recently, and it really only pertains to, or it's really only important to companies that do a lot of porting, is that there's a group of toll-free guidelines that the industry, I always like to say the good guys in the industry follow, that were, the SNAC committee put out the first new one since 1997. There were a lot of kind of small changes in the guideline, but there were a couple major changes in the reject reasons. Probably the one that's going to have the most effect is there's no longer a reject reason for non-pay. It used to be called UBR, unsatisfactory business relationship. That reject reason was taken out for two reasons. One was that it appeared to be widely used to delay valid ports. Other is because the FCC's decision on local did not allow holding a port payment, so we kind of figured the writing was on the wall and it would only be a matter of time before the FCC felt that toll-free needed to be treated the same way. So what you'll find now is the large RESPORGs, including ATL, who follow the guidelines will no longer reject for what we call UR, nor will we accept the reject from somebody else for it. Now, that always leaves the players who just ignore the guidelines and nothing to do about it. I think that may cause there to be some greater movement of things in the guidelines to the tariff when there's a more active board, because it makes sense for some of us to obey these and others not to have anything to compel them to do that. The other reject code that was discontinued is other, because of course that left it open to say anything. But the one we see most often is need bill copy, and so that's one that's used a lot in other, and we discontinued that because it actually, based on the tariff, is the responsibility of the releasing RESPORG to have their act together and do whatever verification they need within 2 days and release the number. And so need bill copy means they're not doing their job and they're putting it on the receiving RESPORG somehow to do what they're supposed to do. So that was removed also. Other than that, most of the rest of it was cleaning some things up. I don't know that there's anything that is going to have a big industry result to it.
Aelea, can I speak to that? This is Greg Fernandez with THE Telco. Some of the larger RESPORGs, two in particular, they're not held accountable for using those reject codes. And it's exceedingly frustrating. They're not held accountable because there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
When they put the number in transition status, we can't submit an SMS-10 form. And that is exceedingly frustrating. And it's kind of like, for us little guys, it's like, tough, see you later, and so we have our customers that are saying, you know what, we really want that number back. We understand, the value to it, and it's like I said, it's exceedingly frustrating. What do you do in cases like that?
First of all, when you say they put it in transition status, when it's in transition status, the legal end user still has the right for the number back.
Exactly.
Right. So they must be putting onto it some reject code for not giving you back the number, and in transition status isn't a reject. So
they whatever the reason is that is given, it's mainly it's normally they just like shirk their responsibility and say don't need a bill copy. We provide a bill copy, and they still reject it. They put it in transition. We can't SMS 10 it. We can't use an SMS 10 form on a number that's in transition status. So there's nothing we can do.
So the answer to what we do is, and again, we're in an entirely different situation when we're talking about AT&T, Verizon, the 10 or so of us who do thousands of ports, who have agreed to follow the guidelines. And the other companies, many of whom follow the guidelines because they're good guys, many of whom just blow you off, in which case you're kind of sunk, including us.
Right.
In the larger cases, we escalate to the primary contact. And remember, these new guidelines have only been out for a couple weeks.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, they just got posted as official March 15th, I think. So at this point, what we're doing in those cases is when we get a reject that is not part of the agreed on reject code, we send back a notice to the RESPORG saying, these are the industry agreed on reject codes. Maybe you don't know that. Here's your chance to come up to speed. And like I said, the big companies have already agreed to comply by them. For instance, UBR. Verizon never did reject for UBR. So that's a bigger change for some of the companies than it is others. But yeah, what we do is we go to the primary contact, and frankly, we harass them. It's in a nice way. Right. I mean, that's why we get something like 95% of our ports accomplished in 72 hours, because we know what the rules are, and we know what's in the tariff, and so, we send back to them quotes out of the tariff that says, and this is the tariff, not just the guidelines, you must handle these things within 2 days. That's in the tariff. Now, the problem has been with the tariff in the past is the tariff is not under the Enforcement Bureau of the FCC. The tariff is to be enforced by the entity that filed the tariff. In this case, this same SMS board, who have not been proactive in doing things like blocking access to SMS if someone's not abiding by the tariff. That was another reason why many of us felt that board needed to be changed, was because for many years we would send things that say, hey, look, this is happening, do something. But, the same thing happened with sales of toll-free numbers. You could report it to the FCC and you'd get nowhere. The industry had not enough leadership from the board that manages all this to get a lot of that done. So my hope is that when the new board gets in, and it depends who gets elected to the new board. Who knows? Maybe we'll elect people who don't care about those things and be worse off than we are now. But I would hope that doesn't happen. The election requirements, nomination requirements require a statement by the candidate that has to answer certain questions so that the industry can kind of see where their thinking is. But currently, we have a very aggressive escalation process here, and not that we never have the same thing happen, you do, but it's more difficult for them to do that when you have, the rules printed out, and also some of it's just relationships. In our case, and we very rarely use this, but in our case, because we do a lot of porting, we could say, okay, well, in fact, I said to one of my reps, I want you to reject that for it's not on green paper. So that RESPORG understands what situation we're in if everybody ignores the guidelines. So there are things like that we can do because we port so much where people are like, whoa, I'm going to get shut down if ATL is not going to process my ports.
I'm going to, we're pretty close. First of all, Aelea, thank you for that update. I'm going to open it up at this point for questions because we've only got about 6 or 7 minutes left before the end of the hour. Are there any questions that anyone has at this point? One of the things that was on the agenda was what about the future of toll-free numbers? And in my view, there is a probability that toll-free numbers could have a very bright future. And for those of you that are on this call, you've probably been seeing for the last 2-3 months that I've been focusing, or the PhoneWord forums, and focusing on toll-free mobile broadband or sender pays data. And in my view, that whole topic is starting to heat up, particularly with AT&T announcing in Barcelona at the World Mobile Conference that they're planning to roll out a application programming interface within the next, I think it's the next year or so, that would allow developers to create applications whereby the sender of the data pays for the data usage instead of the receiver of the data. So what that means is that a sender of data like Netflix would be able to write an application so that they would pick up the mobile data tab. And clearly there are more and more announcements by the day that people are becoming sensitive to their data usage on their mobile devices. So I think there's a very bright possibility for toll-free telephone numbers to transition from the legacy telephone network into the contemporary IP network. However, that the world is not waiting, and the need for this sender pays data, in my view, is growing stronger and stronger by the day. So, everything that you're talking about, Aelea, is, I think, critical, and I'm heartened to hear Tom Fitzgerald's comments that he's got an eye on, what is the future for toll-free telephone numbers, because Internet functionality for toll-free telephone numbers is absolutely paramount in my view. So I think there's a very bright possibility that toll-free telephone numbers could be your toll-free broadband connection address. But it's going to take, we really don't have the luxury of waiting around for that to happen. In addition to AT&T, Skype has announced basically a toll-free broadband connectivity program, and I think you're going to see more and more carriers and other entities addressing the concern that the public has about where am I at in my data plan this month. I don't want to get hit for another $10 if I go into the next gig of data download. So, and by the way, I have invited I'll just call them a major carrier to the Next Phone Word Forum to talk about a Sender Pays Data API and developments. I haven't heard back from them, but I am at work on getting, one or several of the representatives from one or several of the major carriers to talk to the toll-free telephone number industry about what would it look like if the, Netflix or Amazon or, Apple or somebody else was picking up your data connectivity. Any questions? Comments?
Jay?
Yes.
Hi, it's Paul Faust. I don't disagree with you that I think that the shift of data connectivity and how toll free can be very relevant is important, something that we all need to look at. I think from my side of the world and my conversations with the user public, not the back end of the SMS database and how that's managed, I think equally important, if not more important, is the industry as a group reinventing the way toll-free is viewed and looked at. Because, in speaking to agencies and consumers and on a daily basis, they look at toll-free as, yesterday's technology, old, et cetera, even though if I'm correct, and maybe someone who's more knowledgeable, there were more toll-frees, registered recently than in many times. People are using them all the time, but the industry, the consumers, the ad agencies, the marketing companies are viewing them as that's yesterday's stuff, and they're jumping on the new thing, even though it could be here and gone in a second, well, whether it be QR codes or short codes or this dialing or that dialing. And I think we have a responsibility as an industry to kind of change that perception. And I think that is equally important to this shift of sender pays and all these other ideas are related to toll free. Is that it's got to be packaged differently and change the way it's viewed.
I agree.
Which is paramount to its survival. You talk to an ad agency and they would rather go pitch to their client base, star dialing with all of its limitations just because it's new and hip and fresh, or QR codes because they're new and hip and fresh, even though our services, what we all offer, significantly better, perform better, and do more than what theirs do. But we're just, I don't know. It's a very frustrating point from my end of the world, understanding the power of what we offer. But I think just saying it the same way over and over again, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I always try to remind them if it's so outdated, how come the snack group is now being pressured to get going on releasing 844 because we're going to run out of numbers.
Right.
However, we have to be able to fight the warehousing perception at the same time, because some people will come back and say it's because, as we all know, PrimeTel has them all.
Right.
So, those two things have to go together.
Yeah, I think in the industry we all, maybe I'm more hyper aware of it, and I point it out to people all the time. I say, and I've made it an active mission. I've taken pictures every day of the TV screen. I see more and more of them being used by more and more major brands, and we kind of know that. We know the power of them, but the average consumer and the ad agencies of the world, the marketing companies of the world, are not getting the message. And it's very frustrating because we're out there talking about this message and the power of our tools, but you could pick up any newspaper today, any magazine in almost any arena. I mean, I just got back from a conference of a marketing conference for personal injury lawyers. It's all that was there, and they had an expert talking about Twitter, about Facebook, about mobile sites, about short codes, about blogging, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's not one person talking about just simply getting people to call you and using your phone better. So you could pick up any publication in the world. There's the latest story on the latest new technology gizmo for marketing, and you don't see people talking about the power of our services and the phone as much. And I think it's something we all have to think about. Is there a way to not just slap on a quick new coat of paint, but really redefine the asset, the tool that we all provide and market. And I think it's critical to change the perception and change the tide, so to speak.
I agree, Paul. I think it's critical, but it also has to walk hand in hand with some demonstratable functionality that backs up the trusted role that toll-free telephone numbers have played in the past, the trusted and excellent, top-of-mind perception that most of the public has. But I think it's going to take more than just talking about it. We need some new functionality that dovetails with what's happening in the rest of the ecosystem. And, I am as optimistic or more optimistic than ever that the path for that is unfolding. So, and in fact, probably in the next 30 days, I'll be able to show you some exciting things that more closely integrate than ever the telephony and the web than I've ever seen. So,
look, that was part of the original, probably the driving force between the vision of the original toll-free summit was we have a great, smart group of people in the industry. Yes, there are bad apples in the industry who, in large part, have been excluded from our summiting. But the point of the summit was to put our brains together, put our marketing muscle together, put our ideas together to redefine the industry, to set standards, to redefine the industry, to ensure compliance, and take it to another step, as opposed to just a reason to get together for 2 days and and just hang out and talk about what's currently going on. I think that we need to drive that and really get more people active. It shouldn't be on the shoulders of a few that have always done it, and to get more people active in our industry and really making it the industry we want it to be. That's what I'm passionate about. So
awesome. Okay, well, we're a little past the hour. I appreciate everybody's attendance. I hope this is valuable for you. This is recorded, and you can listen to it immediately online. If you go to phoneword.com, Phoneword Forum, you can see the playback instructions.
Aelea, thank you very much for your time. It was great.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Aelea, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jay.
Okay, bye-bye.